Okay. Hopefully you see this. You know if you're in the right place or not. So this is custom content migrations to Drupal 8. It's kind of a two-part presentation. The first part is going to be some slides giving you a nice overview of how do you get content and configuration, for that matter, into Drupal 8. We're going to go through some of the available options. And then the second half is actually going to be a live demo, because I'm dangerous, and that's what I like to do. It's actually a really simple custom migration. And I like to do this demo because I think it takes a lot of the fear about doing custom migrations into Drupal 8 when you see how little is actually involved. And granted, it's a simple example. So let's try and get this working. Oh, I have to, there we go. Seriously? All right, I'll just do it that way. So this is me, Mike Anello. My company is drupaleasy. We do training and consulting and project coaching. Probably the thing we're most well known for is we have a 12-week Drupal career online program. We meet 3 half-days a week, and it takes people looking to, as we like to say, go pro. So if you're a Drupal hobbyist or maybe just Drupal content administrator or something, and you want to learn how to develop Drupal sites the right way with a strong emphasis on best practices, talk to me afterwards, or you can go visit our booth, although I think the booths are being shut down probably in the next hour or so. You can find us at drupaleasy.com. My username is ultimike, pretty much everywhere, on Twitter as well as on drupal.org. And I am one of the contributors of the Drupal 8 core migration system, so I know a little bit about it. And I'm not being facetious. I actually just know a little bit about it. I know enough to be dangerous. We'll put it that way. And I don't know why my arrow keys are not being cooperative, but let's just do it this way. So if you'd like, you could take notes together as a group. And I actually got everybody started. If you go to this URL, and I don't know if I can drag this over and show it to you real quick. Can I? Oh, yeah, there we go. Let's drag it over here. So, oh boy, Google does not like me doing that. Let's try it this way. Do that. Then I have no idea where that window went. All right. Well, it's there, trust me. We'll find it in a few minutes. I'll show it to you. But I've pre-populated the hack pad for this session with links to the slides, links to GitHub for the sample code, modules that I use in the demo, and things like that. All right, so yeah, Migration Basics 101. So this will kind of set the table for us on what exactly is a migration. And this is not even really super Drupal specific, this graphic, but in Drupal, in migration, you're going to have a source where your data is coming from. You're going to have a destination at the other end. And then you're going to have what we call, in Drupal, we call it the pipeline in the migrate project. And that pipeline includes something to get the data from the source, to map the data between a source field and a destination field, or a source variable and a destination variable. Processing, which normally I say massaging the data, transforming it a little bit or cleaning it up along the way, and then you actually want to set that data in the destination. So this is a pretty generic idea of how migrations work. You have a source, a destination, and then a pipeline that data travels through as it moves along. Now, it'd be great, believe me, it'd be great if to go from a D6 site, a Drupal 6 site, to a Drupal 8 site, it was this simple, where we had a source, a destination, and one migration. But unfortunately, we have more than one migration because, as we all know, there's more than one thing in Drupal. We can have users, we could have vocabularies, we have content types. So we end up getting a bunch of different migrations. And in reality, we get a lot of different migrations typically. So each of these migrations is just a little bit different, where it gets a particular piece of data, it puts it in the pipeline, it maps it, it massages it, and it puts it on the destination somewhere. In fact, for a simple, and by simple I'm talking like Drupal 6 core plus CCK and no other modules, for a simple migration to migrate a site that's built on that into Drupal 8 there's over 60 migrations. Easy. That's actually, I picked the lowest possible number that I thought would be realistic there. So there's a lot of migrations. But what it comes all down to is for each migration, keep this in mind, because we're going to kind of come full circle at the end of this presentation back to this diagram. So source, destination, and a pipeline. All right, so let's get a little more specific now. How do migrations work in Drupal? Well, number one, with the core migrate module and the core migrate Drupal module, we're not talking about just content. We're talking about configuration as well. So how many people were around when Drupal 7 was launched? How many people were using Drupal? So there's an upgrade path to Drupal 7. And that upgrade path basically looked at your Drupal 6 database and transmorgified it into a Drupal 7 database. And keep in mind that Drupal 6 database contains more than content. It contains configuration. It contains your field definitions. It contains your views definitions. It contains all kinds of stuff. So when we're talking about migrating a Drupal 7 site into Drupal 8, we have to specify, do we want to move everything? And when I say everything, I'm not talking about all content. Do we want to move everything? Content plus configuration. And that's normally one of the first decisions that you have to make when you're talking about migrating to Drupal 8. And more often than not, that answer is going to be no. Because a lot of times, the site that you're migrating from could be 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. And, there's not too many organizations whose information architecture hasn't changed at least a little bit in the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years. So you probably want to, number one, take advantage of, new ways to organize your data. But there's also, whenever you build a site, there's always one or two little things that kind of bug you for years. Oh, we did that wrong, but it's too late to go back and fix it. Migrating from between major versions of Drupal is exactly the right time to fix all of those annoying things. So often you don't want to carry all of that configuration forward to your new, fresh, shiny Drupal 8 site. Often you want to, fix up your information architecture and other configuration. So we'll come back to that in a second. But I've basically broken up how to get content into Drupal into 4 big buckets. And I have 4 names for them. Number 1 is House of Pain, which you can guess what that's going to be. Number 2 is the Whole Enchilada, and that's where we're bringing all content and all configuration over. Number 3 is Migration by Subtraction, which I think is probably a pretty good solution for some sites and not all sites. Maybe where time and budget are limited, this is a good solution. I'm actually a big proponent of what I call migration satisfaction. Because I do enough of them where I really do not like taking old cruft and configuration from a Drupal 6 site that was built 7 years ago into a Drupal 8 site. I want to be able to kind of rip the Band-Aid off and just kind of jettison all that baggage that I don't want to be carrying forward. So let's go through these 4 real quick. Okay, so House of Pain, manually migrate content. So if you have a big site with a lot of content, it's a lot of pain. But realistically, if you have a small site, and I'm talking maybe on the order of 100, 200 nodes or less, assuming your site is primarily content, this is sometimes actually a reasonable and cost-effective way to go. And this basically means opening up your Drupal 6 or 7 site, or earlier, opening up your Drupal 8 site, looking at a piece of content here, deciding if you want it over in Drupal 8, and manually copying and pasting. So what are some of the pros and cons of this? Number 1, if you have an author doing it, you're actually updating your content as you go manually. So again, if you have 10,000 nodes, probably not the way to go. But if you have only a handful, it's a good opportunity to kind of review your content, make sure it's up to date. And the cons, well, it's manual. So it's really limited to just relatively small sites. But I wouldn't discount it. I would, definitely don't discount it for the right size site. Because it can, if you think about it, do a cost-benefit analysis, it's probably going to be a lot cheaper to manually migrate 100 nodes than to have, hire a developer or have one of your developers who, maybe they don't know anything about the migrate system, take the time to learn it and implement it. And then even if you do that, you still haven't had the opportunity to do that content audit and update. So keep that in mind. All right, the whole enchilada is basically the Drupal 8 core upgrade path. So, pre-Drupal 8, this was the take your Drupal 6 database, transmorgify it into a Drupal 7 database, and basically everything that you had in Drupal 6 is now in Drupal 7. The migrate system in Drupal 8 allows you to do this still. There's a module called migrate upgrade, and it basically you point it at a Drupal 6 database or a Drupal 7 database, and it runs, those 60, 70, 80, 90 migrations, could be more depending on how complex your site is. And it copies and it moves configuration and content over. So if you've got 10 content types on your Drupal 7 site, and each one has 15 different fields, all of that stuff is going to be recreated in Drupal 8. So the good and the bad, warts and all. So this is where often I think, clients that I work with don't want to take all that stuff. Maybe a couple of content types are obsolete. Maybe you kind of want to rework a couple of them, add some fields, get rid of some fields, rename some stuff, extremely common. Maybe you want to combine a couple of content types into one. This is not really the way to go then, because this is it's relatively simple, and I'll show you a screenshot in a little bit. So the pros is it's probably the easiest of all, and I'll show you a screenshot as to how easy it is in a few minutes. But as I mentioned, it does not allow for that refactoring. And plus, the only content and configuration that's going to be migrated over is that it's basically core and any contributed modules that actually provide their own migration classes. So a lot of stuff that lives in a contributed modules or contributed module data that they're responsible for is not going to get migrated over. So you have to be really careful with this one. Personally, I think the doesn't allow for refactoring. For me, that's kind of the end of story with this one. Migration by subtraction. This is a pretty good one. It's basically a modified core upgrade. It allows you to basically simulate a core upgrade, the whole enchilada, but then maybe get rid of some stuff. Manually remove some migrations or tweak some here and there. So it allows for what I call limited customization. The cons are, when you do this, you have to be really careful about removing migrations because a field migration is probably going to be dependent on a field-based migration, which is going to be dependent on a content type migration. So you can get into this whole dependency hell. So it can be very tricky removing some migrations. And it doesn't allow for full refactoring, I'll say. You can still refactor stuff, but I think at some point you're going to hit a tipping point where if you're refactoring a lot using this method, it's probably just easier just to go full custom. And then the one that I prefer, and I think, given, again, budget and time, I think this is normally the best solution. And, it's fully custom, so it's not a huge surprise. The pros are you only migrate over what you want. You only migrate over the configuration, the content, what you want, in the form that you want, into your new information architecture. So it allows you to pretty much build your Drupal 8 site almost independently of what you had before. And then as long as the migration team and the site building and developer team, they're probably one team most of the time. But as you go, you can say, well, we've got all this stuff on the Drupal 6 site. We need some place for this stuff to go. Where's this vocabulary going to go on Drupal 8? So it allows you to kind of refactor and build your Drupal 8 site the right way, and move everything into its new home. The cons are, well, it's time and money, right? And it requires knowledge. So it really, if you're going to be doing a lot of migrations or you have got a really big migration, it probably makes sense to invest the time to learn how to do it the right way. And hopefully, kind of the goal for today is to kind of get you over that initial hump of saying, oh my gosh, custom migrations is a whole other thing I have to learn. When I do the demo and show you, there's code, but there's no PHP. We're going to write a custom, well, we're not going to have it written. We're going to walk through a custom module that has zero PHP. It's all just YAML. So it's all just, properly formatted text file, which, sounds like code, but it's not PHP. So, all right, so a little more details about each of these. How do you actually do this stuff? So so we're going to go through these four again. There we go. So details and demos. So House of Pain. Normally you want to create your content inventory. And honestly, you probably want to do this for any type of migration you're going to do. You need to teach. You need to train the authors or the writers or the editors who's actually ever going to be, doing that content migration. And then back away slowly and kind of let them do their job. And, again, if you've got just a metric ton of content and users and stuff, this can be a lengthy process. And depending on how far along the development of your new site is, when to start this process, it can be a little bit tricky. The Whole Enchilada. So this is kind of the built-in upgrade path. So you start with an empty site. You enable migrate and migrate Drupal. Those are now part of Drupal core. The migrate Drupal UI is actually in 8.1. That's not part of Drupal core as well. And then you go to this special URL and you enter some information and you click a button and you let it do its thing. So I believe I have a screenshot of that. Oh, then you click buttons. So this is it. There's nothing more. There's advanced options. So basically you point to your source database, your Drupal 6 or Drupal 7 database. You point to your files. I gotta stay over here for the recording, sorry. You point to the files directory where all your images and PDFs are, and you review the upgrade, and it'll tell you what it's about to do, and then you hit a button and you just kind of let it go. The nice thing, one of the really great things about the D8 migration stuff now is that it does not modify your old database. It does not modify your D6 or D7 database. There's no more transmogrifying of that database. So you can point this at a dev server or something and suck it all in and basically run this as many times as you like until you get everything you need. So it's actually very simple, but because it's very simple, you get everything. You get all of those migrations, all of that configuration, all of those vocabularies, all that stuff that isn't used anymore, all of the little annoying things that you had in your old site are now in your brand new site, which can be disconcerting, to say the least. So addition by subtraction. Actually, I changed the name of that one. It was migration by subtraction. So I've got to fix that slide, I guess. So similar thing, you start with a Drupal 8.1 site. You enable similar modules plus migrate plus, which is in contrib. And then you run this magic command, which if you leave off the last configure only parameter, you're running the upgrade path. But by running it as configuration only, and that might be wrong. I think it's actually, I got to check that. I don't know if it's configure only or configuration only. I'll check that and update the slide. But by doing this, it doesn't actually run the migrations. It just creates all of those little configurations. And then once you have all of those configurations, you can export them and put them into a custom module. Because they're code, it's just a bunch of YAML files. And once they're there, then you can start pulling them out, like literally deleting the files for the migrations that you don't want to run. If there's a content type and 5 fields you don't want migrated, you just delete those YAML files. So you basically start with everything, delete the things you don't want, and I think I have another slide here, and maybe edit the ones you do want. Simple edits like change a field name or map something to a different field or something like that. If you start doing anything more than that, to me it starts feeling like maybe you shouldn't be doing it this way. Maybe you should just be going full custom. So there's definitely a fine line. You can really get to a very custom solution from either direction, either by starting with everything and subtracting or by starting with nothing and building up. Personally, I think it's easier to start with nothing and build up because then you don't have to undo all kinds of stuff which you may or may not fully understand, at least that I don't fully understand. Yeah, and then you run the migration and keep your fingers crossed. So that, this is how I kind of envision that, where we've removed some of the migrations, and the ones in red are the ones that we maybe changed up a little bit. So the one I really like, and this is pretty much the only one I've ever done with the exception of my site. drupaleasy.com was actually done with the whole enchilada, which is a decision I kind of regret now. So I'm slowly going back and making little changes. But I did mine really early, so I'm not sure I could have done a really solid job of a custom migration when I did mine. So again, similarly, you start with an empty site, enable the same core modules plus migrate tools and migrate plus contrib modules. Here's the great part. You build out your Drupal 8 site the right way, the way you want it to be. You're not tied to anything that's on that old Drupal 6 or Drupal 7 site. You do your refactoring. You build the right information architecture this time. And then, as part of this process, and there's 2 bullet points, one after the other, but build the Drupal 8 site and figure out how to map them. They're really one. You're going to be kind of interchanging those. As you're building out or designing the Drupal 8 site, figure out that, this old content type in Drupal 6 over there needs to map to this new content type in Drupal 8 over here. Or, this vocabulary that's got 13 fields attached to it really should have been a content type all along. So we actually want to map a vocabulary to a content type. That's badass, and you can do it. So all that stuff, that's the site development and the migration development process. And then you build your custom migrations, which, granted, sounds scary. And if you've got a really hairy pipeline, if you've got data coming in that you've got to do 13 different things to, it can be scary. And it should be, because that's a lot of stuff to do to it. But I found the vast majority of these custom migrations that I write tend to be YAML only, configuration only. Every now and then I have to, write a custom source or a custom processor or something like that. But even those things tend to be, just a few lines of custom code. So really, like I said earlier, my goal here is to take away some of the fear of building a custom migration. And then you run your custom migrations, and then you have a little dance party, because everything's going to be great. So custom migrations is kind of how I visualize it. You choose the migrations, and they're pretty much all custom. Okay, so danger. Live demo. Okay, so let's set it up. What am I going to do? I'm actually going to use drupaleasy.com on Drupal 6 as my source. So a real kind of, not a manufactured source database, a real live source. Well, not live, but a previously live source database. I'm going to move content from one content type to another, from a Drupal 6 site into a Drupal 8 site, and make just honestly a couple of very simple tweaks to it. Nothing groundbreaking. I don't want to put too much in and risk this going long or losing people. I want a nice simple example here. So what are we going to do? We're going to change the content type. On Drupal 6, we call it audio. On Drupal 8, it's a podcast content type, and so we should call it podcast. So that's, very minor. We have this field name on Drupal 6, and granted, it's just a machine name. It shouldn't really bug anybody. It bugs me. So we changed the field name from field embed to field audio URLs. In the Drupal 6 site, field embed, it was a CCK link field with the embedded media field widget module thing on top of it. I don't remember actually how all that works. I'm going to migrate it just to a pure link field, which is built into Drupal 8 core. Here's one little tricky parts. I like Markdown. So I have the Markdown filter on my Drupal 6 site. I want to keep that text format on my Drupal 8 site. So I have to make sure that when I migrate it, I set the text format to use a Markdown filter. And yeah, so what do we have to do? We're going to build the Drupal 8 site. It's going to take me about 5 minutes, and we're going to do it right here. We're going to create a custom migration. Spoiler alert, it's already created. We're going to pretend to create it by looking at the code and acting like we're typing. So that's going to be awesome. And then we're going to run it, and it's all going to work great because I've practiced it, time and time again. And then we'll roll it back because we can do that now, finally, with migrations. And then we'll roll it back in. Maybe we'll roll it out. Anyway, depends how much time we have with the hokey pokey. So, yeah, so here's our starting point. I've got a fresh Drupal 8.1.6 or 7, whatever the latest is. I have that. I used a standard installation profile, and this is basically me showing you that there's nothing up my sleeves here. There's nothing baked into this. I have these contributed modules enabled. Admin toolbar for me is a new admin menu. I don't go anywhere without it. There's a markdown module for that text filter. The markdown module requires the libraries module, just like in Drupal 7. And then migrate tools and migrate plus. Migrate plus is needed to get us the ability to make these custom migrations. And migrate tools is your secret weapon because that gives us all the cool drush commands that are identical with migrate for Drupal 7. So it gives us drush migrate status, drush migrate import, drush migrate rollback, all of those.
Wait, can you get those into core?
We'll see. We'll see. Hopefully the drush command should be. I don't know why they're not. Yeah. So what do we have to do still? So we're going to very quickly configure a new text format for Markdown. We're going to create the new content type, and we're going to act like it's radically different than the old one because we're refactoring, so we have to do different things. Oh, okay, so that was, I thought I had another bullet there. And then we're going to review our code, and our code is going to look suspiciously like this. It's going to have, not our code, I'm sorry, our YAML, because it's friendly. It's not, right? So we're going to have a source section, we're going to have a destination section, and we're not going to have cool little arrows. We're going to have this thing that's called the process section. But the process section is just code word for the pipeline. And we're going to go field by field and look at the pipeline for all the things we're mapping. All right, I think that's my last slide. Yeah, okay. So I'll come back to this, but all this code is available already. All right, so let me exit out of this. I wonder where that other window went. It like totally just disappeared on me. Is it over there? Seriously, I had like a whole other window with all of with the site and everything on it. All right, do I have to go back to it? Let's see if I come back here. No. All right, let me do it this way. Displays and mirror. Maybe I'll get it back magically. No. Okay. So there are the slides. We don't need those anymore. We'll come back to those. That is a major bummer. Live demo. Awesome. All right. It's not a huge bummer, but we'll just do this. No, that's not it. I'm using Acquia Dev Desktop. Nothing crazy, like I promised. All right, I'm just going to do it this way. There we go. So we'll go here. We'll go Drupal 8 migrate. Okay, so here's our site. Okay, so fresh. I just redid I just reinstalled it this morning. So 8.1.6, nothing crazy. So let me get my... All right, so first thing we want to do, move this up top, we have to install some modules. So I love Drupal console, module, install, and you guys love watching me type. I know, it's fascinating. Migrate Drupal, this is part of Drupal core. Migrate tools, contrib. Migrate plus is out of contrib. Admin toolbar, tools, mark. Do I have a spelling mistake? Oh, okay. Markdown libraries. I think that'll get everything, because there's some dependencies that I think will be gotten there. It's like watching paint dry. I was bummed when I saw this session was up against Jesus's and Enzo's session on Drupal console. Because now that we're 34 minutes in, I'll tell you, you should have been in that session. That's much now. Because Drupal console is pretty freaking awesome. So watch their video. I'm sure their video is going to be great. So. All right, so we have this. So we need a text format because we're refactoring. So we're going to go to configuration. And now that I have migrate tools, I can do this. Not migrate tools, I'm sorry, admin toolbar. So we're going to do new text format. We're going to call it, hey, how about markdown? I got to be careful here because I have some YAML that depends on machine names. So we want to do convert line breaks, markdown, correct faulty. Little trick. Make sure markdown's first, otherwise it doesn't actually work. I think somehow this, when you run this first, it changes something, and I'll save you the 30 minutes of headbanging that I went through. All right, so we've got a new text format, so let's create our new content type, again, because we're refactoring. So we're going to call this one podcast, machine name podcast. And we're going to keep it simple. We're going to have a title, body, and the link field for the actual podcast MP3 URL. So we're going to add a field here. And we're going to make it of type link. And it's going to be audio URLs. Scratching an itch that I've had for about 6 years, changing this machine name. I want it unlimited. The old site, we can only have one URL per podcast, but we like to output our podcast in multiple formats, so now in Drupal 8 we can do that. Well, we could do it on Drupal 6, but we never did. And with this link field, we don't really need the link text, so I'm going to disable it and save settings. All right, so we've refactored. We've now created a new content type that is infinitely better than the last one, at least in my head. All right, so it's migrating time. So we've got a Drupal 6 site out there. If I can see drupaleasy6.dd, it's now that we've launched a new one, I can say this is horrible, right? So we have all these, these podcasts, and so this is all written in Markdown. So we have a title, we have the body, and then where's the link? Down here, maybe. Oh, you know what it is? It's a Flash. It was Flash based, so that was horrible. Upon horrible. So it doesn't even appear because I have Flash turned off here. So it would have appeared right here. So we're going to go from this into our new Drupal 8 site. All right, so let's look at some code. So we're going to start with, I have it open already. There we go. So this is the complete custom module that I've written. It's called DE6 Migrate. DE6 Migrate, and it lives just like any other custom module should inside module/custom. So nothing tricky here. It's got an info file. Make this a bit bigger. Again, nothing out of the ordinary here. A couple of dependencies. This obviously needs these two modules to run. And the way migrations work, a lot of the migration code is already there. We just have to configure it. For an example, like a node migration exists, we just have to tell the node migration, what content type it is, what the fields are. And then the code can take care of the rest. So a lot of the migrate stuff is just in configuration, which is why we can get away with just writing YAML files. So inside config install, so whenever this module is enabled, these configurations get sucked into Drupal's active store. Make sure I open the right one first. I have 2 of them, and honestly, for this demonstration, I could get away with 1, but I think that migration groups are so important, I wanted to use this one. So what a migration group lets you do is it lets you specify shared configuration. So if you have to write 60 different migration configurations, and they're all looking at the same source database, There's no reason for you to have to, repeat what the source database is 60 different times. So in this case, we basically say anything that is using the migration group of DE6 has access to the source key of legacy. Now, what the heck does this mean? Well, source is what's the source of the data, and then the source of the data is identified by a key named legacy. Now, this literally could be Fred. It doesn't matter. I just chose legacy. But where is this? What does this mean? Well, quite simply, in our settings.php file, we basically just have another database connection identified as legacy. So the migration, the migrate module is going to look for this and know that, oh, anytime I'm using a migration with this particular group, the source is this database. So you can see this is the Drupal 8 site database. This is the Drupal Easy 6 site database. So in this case, relatively simple, just to hard code this into your settings.php file. Now you don't have to hard code it. Using Drush, you can pass all this stuff in as parameters. I just find it easier to put it in here. All right, so now that's kind of all of the build-up. Let's get to the meat of this, if I can find it again. There we go. So the only other file we have is our actual migration. So I named it. It has to be called migrate plus.migration, and this is our name, my name, DE6_audio. I often name it for the source content type rather than the destination. I don't know. That's not a best practice, or it's not a best practice either, just me being consistent with the way I do things. And we have this migration. So did I write this from scratch? Did I start at line 1 and start typing? Absolutely not. What I actually do, and I don't think it's a cheat, it's just kind of the easy way of doing it, is I've got another Drupal 8 site where I actually run the migration by subtraction, that configuration only switch, and that actually outputs configurations for all different types of things, including a node. So I just go into that and I find kind of what I'm looking for, and I select all, copy, and I paste it in here, and then I just start making my tweaks from here. So we've got some metadata up here, an ID, a friendly label. Here's where we tie it to the migration group. And now here's where we're going to go back to that one diagram with source, destination, and the pipeline. Here's our source. So we're defining the source, and we're going to basically use the Drupal 6 node plugin. Well, how do I know that exists, and what is that? Okay, well, documentation in the migrate project could be better. I will concede that point. But there are a bunch of source plugins available for Drupal 6 and Drupal 7 that we can reuse in our custom migrations. We don't have to reinvent anything. So there's a plugin that knows how to get nodes of a particular content type out of Drupal 6. And to use it, we just basically have to say, we want to use the D6 node plugin. We can even specify the node type. So we can tell the plugin, hey plugin, go get me Drupal 6 nodes of type audio. If I were to leave this node type line off, it would get me all of the nodes. So this is how I specify that I only want nodes of type audio. We're going to skip the pipeline for a second and come right down to the bottom. Our destination, the right-hand side of that graphic. What do we want to create at the end? Well, they're going to stay nodes. So our destination is going to be what we call a destination plugin, which is entity node. So we want to create nodes. So you can see right here, this is actually, if you want to take a vocabulary and turn it into a node, or a term into a node, use the taxonomy term plugin up here and output it as a node down here. So stuff like that becomes really freaking easy in Drupal 8. I'm almost giddy about it. So, all right, so the middle part is the fun part. And this is where we earn our money. This is where we do our work. It's the pipeline, the process section. So we're going to look at some simple ones first. Nothing gets more simple than title. The way this works is the destination is first, followed by colon, followed by the source. So in this case, we are taking the title from the source and mapping that to the title on the destination. So we've got a bunch of, and we kind of have properties and fields all mixed together here. So here are some other, these are all properties, right? So we're not changing anything here, but we're saying, whatever the value of the status is for a particular node on the source, set that as the status on the destination as well. So those are easy ones. So we can kind of go through those and see, revision stuff, timestamp. So, right there we knock out a big group of ones. By not mapping the node and version IDs, the destination is going to generate new ones. We can completely map, if we wanted to, keep old node IDs and version IDs. The Drupal core upgrade path does exactly this. And it's fine when you're doing the whole enchilada, because there's nothing else that's going to be getting in the way. Couple rules, obviously number one, if you already have data on that destination site, then you could get integrity constraint violations very easily, because you could, if you're mapping node IDs and you're bringing over node 7 and you already have a node 7, migrate's going to be like, not doing that. So be very careful. With custom migrations, I tend to let Drupal core on the destination side generate those IDs. All right, so we got a bunch of other pipelines that look like this. So the destination is the type. So this is actually the content type. So in this case, I don't want to take the value of the content type from the source. I want to change it, because on the source it's field audio. It's the machine name is audio. I want it to be podcast on the destination. So I've got to use what's called a process plugin. And the core migrate's got a lot of really cool, useful process plugins that do things that allow us to set default values. We've got a great one, it's not in here, we've got a great one called static map. And all static map does is basically says, if the value coming out of the source is, blue, then on the destination set it to green. If the source says red, on the destination set it to yellow. It allows you to map field values from one thing to another. Super useful, super useful. This default value one, super simple. All it basically says is, set the default value to type, or set type to the default value, which is podcast. So all this guy does is basically set the type of every node to podcast. So similarly, this one has a little funky source thing, but it basically works the same way. This sets the default value, or this sets the lang code of everything to undefined. Here's one, because if you note, I did not do a user migration, so I can't map user IDs from source to destination. I could, I'm just not doing it in this example. So I'm setting them all to 1. So the admin user is going to be the author for all of these nodes coming in. Fields with text formats are a little bit tricky, because if you think about it, when you look at a field with a text format, you've got the body and then you've got the little select thing with the text formats. So that's 2 pieces of data you have to move. So we use this little slash nomenclature. So basically say the format of the body we want to set equal to Markdown, which is the machine name of our new text format. And the value of the body field, on D6 it's called body. So we're setting it in D7. And then the last one, that's just a little bit tricky, is our one lone field. On D6 it was called field embed. And if you think about fields, fields can have all kinds of crazy stuff. Think about the address field, right? Address field holds all kinds of data. So there has to be some brain somewhere that knows how to map, multi-valued fields. Well, I don't want to use multi-valued fields, but fields that have different parts to them from D6 to D8. So in this case, we have a plugin. It's already there. We don't have to write it. It's in core. That knows how to take Drupal 6 CCK link fields and knows how to handle them. So we're basically going to use this plugin, and we're going to say, well, hey, plugin, look at this data and stick it in there in our new field audio URLs. And there's all kinds of these. If you start trolling through, maybe trolling is not the best word, but if you start looking through the migrate module and the migrate Drupal module, you'll see all of the plugins that are available. Again, documentation could be better. There's actually, so I dissed the documentation a couple times. I will actually mention the process plugins that are with core are documented quite well on Drupal.org. And that's it. So we have, our destination, our source, and our pipeline. So at this point, we can come back here, and we're going to do a Drupal module install DE6. What did I call it now? Migrate? Oh gosh, I forgot what the name of my module is. DE6 migrate. So we're going to install our module, which is going to take those YAML files and bring them into the active store. Oh man, I'm late. We're almost done. Big finish. Big, assuming nothing goes wrong. So now we have our drush commands back. Migrate status. So there's our migration. It's looking at the source and saying, hey, you've got 172 nodes over there on the source. All right, great. Drush migrate import DE6 AUD audio. Let's do that real quick. Should be flawless. There we go. We do another drush migrate status. We got them all in. Big finish. Drum roll, please. Back to our site. There they all are. If you pick one, you'll see we've got our content. Markdown has been converted to HTML. And down here, we've got our URL. And if you look way down here, it actually has the right URL down there. So the migration was successful. So if you don't know PHP, you can still write migrations. Granted, it's not crazy simple, but hopefully this should take some of the fear out of it. So real quick before we go, all of this code I just showed you is available on GitHub. And there's a full blog post with this example, goes into even more details, available on drupaleasy.com. All of these links are in that hackpad thing, which, let me see if I can pull that up real quick. Drupal GovCon hack. Oh, 2016, thank you. There we go. So right there, custom content migrations. I don't know if anyone else has been making notes. Nope, but there's all the links, modules I used, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Thank you very much. Sorry I kept it. Hi.
Can we have your business card?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, I need to call you. I have a lot of projects. I need to get some training.
Okay.
I do them. It's a big multi-site that I need to move.
Yeah, let me know. I mean, I can. I do project coaching as well, so I can work with the development team and kind of get them started and help them out as they need help. So,
Thanks.
okay, thanks.
Wow,
Hey, how are you?
great stuff.
All right, good.
How
Good deal,
does
thanks.
the plugin looks like? The one that was converting the CCK
Um,
tag to.
Well, here I'll show you where it is. I should probably get out of here. I don't know if there's someone. Are you presenting next? Or are you? Okay. So if you go into core modules, migrate Drupal, just knock it over here. Source, plugins, migrate, CCK field. Oh, no, not that one. Oh, I'm in the wrong
No,
place.
I was asking the custom one that was mapping the audio.
It wasn't custom. That's part of core.
Okay, so my question then will be, how do you map if you have a different content type, or we have a situation like when we were migrating, I migrated using migrate module
Right.
from D6 to D7, and then I had to write my own mapping, the field
If you have to write your own,
mappings. Yes.
yeah,
And also another situation where you have like a modules that are contribute on D6 to D7.